I'm very thrilled to have this opportunity to present to you, and I'll be covering primarily two different topics. Firstly, some product updates, both on cloud and on server, to give you a sense of where Atlassian's at and what our product strategy is going forward. And equally important, giving you hopefully a bit of insight into some of our own practices internally at Atlassian, how that couples with those tools to really make teams that much more effective. So hopefully by the end of the day, you'll have several different things to take back with you. Just a little bit more about myself. So I'm part of the solutions engineering team with Atlassian. It means that I get to work with some of our biggest customer implementations. So I see a lot of different challenges in terms of how the products are adopted. I'm based in Sydney. I'm originally from the US, and I've worked for a number of companies over the last almost 30 years in Australia, in the US, and in Europe, all in the technology sector. And I've also been part of a number of teams, and I've managed several teams over that period as well. And I think each of us can probably think of teams that we've been on that worked really, really well, and you almost wonder, like, how did that happen? It seems to be almost more by accident than by design when you work on a really highly functioning, effective team. And by contrast, I'm sure many of us have been on teams where we thought, I can't wait to get off of this effort or this project. It's just not working very well. And so I think for myself, and partly why I came to Atlassian, it really makes you think through what is required for a successful team. What are those ingredients? And how can you repeat that? Because again, it's not as easy as you might always think. I've wondered about it as a manager, especially when I'm wearing that hat. Atlassian wonders about it constantly. We actually have an obsession with teams and making teams more productive. Our stock ticker is team. We have people here out of our Sydney office lying on the ground to form the word team. It is without a doubt Atlassian's single biggest obsession. And it's not only ours. It is an obsession that now serves teams in more than 119,000 organizations that are customers of ours across the globe. So for all of you in the room that are already using us today or even thinking of using us, we thank you for being part of that effort. And again, it's a definite focus, a definite obsession for us, quite intentionally. So why teams? We all have worked on different teams, but what is really behind Atlassian's obsession with teams? It's quite simply, they unlock so much potential. Again, when you think of those teams that worked really well and some of the cool initiatives and just a lot of the technologies that have come out in the last 3 to 5 to 10 years, technology is doing some amazing things, and it's always a team that's behind that. In fact, part of our mission objective for the company is unlocking that full potential in every team. And it's something that we take quite seriously. It's something that we focus on with a lot of intent. And it's something that is becoming a bit more difficult to do because teams are more complex. There are a lot more dependencies. And so ensuring that that efficiency can occur is a bit of a challenge. You don't have to go back quite as long ago as this example. But if we go back about 100 years ago, if you just think about something we use every day like an automobile, the original Model T Ford that's being shown here, when it was in production, had only about 1,500 parts, and it took about 2.5 hours to assemble. Now, if you fast forward that to the cars that we're looking at for today and some of the things that Tesla are doing, these have tens of thousands of parts. They're considerably more sophisticated. And obviously a lot more advantages over the Model T, but much more complex process, a lot of teams, a lot more coordination that needs to occur as part of that. This type of cross-team, cross-functional organization is difficult, even in the best of companies. So when you think of what's required, again, what are some of those different types of ingredients that are necessary for enabling teams? It comes down to 3 broad categories. We're going to talk to two of them today. Great teamwork essentially is a mixture of having the right people with the right products and the right practices. Now, people I'm not going to talk to today. That's a different type of seminar, different discussion. But in terms of products and practices, I think it's crucial to note that you need both of those. If you don't approach using the product in the right way, having the best product can still be implemented poorly. So this morning, we are going to talk a bit more on the product side. This afternoon, we'll speak a bit more to practices. But I just wanted to line out up front the fact that you definitely need both parts of that equation. When we see some of the large customers that we operate with, and we even look internally, we believe that across that, there's one huge force multiplier in terms of any of these products or practices you implement, and that really comes down to openness. Now, being open across people, products, and practices, open in terms of people feeling comfortable to contribute, to criticize in a constructive way, to engage as part of a team, but being part of a safe environment through which they have full understanding of what that team's objectives are and what some of their recommendations are on how to best propagate that more of a decentralized approach for teaming activities. Same for products, having the right mixture of products so that with the best velocity as possible, you can get information from one part of the organization to another so that they can take action on it rather than having it siloed up, which is quite often what occurs today. And then finally, the right practices as well. What are some tools and tips and approaches that Atlassian has seen, that we've seen in some of our bigger customers for implementing that across the board? And this idea of openness is more than just a cute tagline. It really is something that permeates our culture. It's one of our core company values. If any of you have ever seen the several values that we document, one is open company. And it is throughout our entire ethos of how we operate at Atlassian. And this is just a snapshot of some new hires beginning their tenure. And I remember for myself that the biggest impact in terms of understanding openness for me was that the company I came to work for on my first day was the same company that I saw when I interviewed, was the same company that I saw online when I did my research. It was very transparent. It was very obvious. I knew exactly what my department would look like, what my manager would be like, how things would operate. There really were no surprises. And I've definitely worked at other companies where that's not the case. You're putting on your best act and vice versa. And certainly you want to make sure there's a fit. But it was much more open here. It was very seamless, very transparent. And again, that openness just carries through everything we do and how we approach things every day. You would hope that across the board, things would always be that open, whether it's within a company or across different teams or across different products. But of course, it's not always that way. A lot of information flows around, but quite often it's not simply across a few different systems, but rather something that looks more akin to this, right? And we all live in this world, whether it's our personal and or our professional lives. We have a number of products that we're dealing with. Some might be Atlassian, some might not. Salesforce, we also use internally. Facebook, we do marketing on Facebook and Twitter. A number of different repositories of information. And it can be hard to streamline activities across all these different areas. So our intent realizing this reality is that there's no way to replace all of that, but rather we need to find a way to wrap around that and provide some cohesiveness so that individual users aren't left having to struggle and figure out where to go for things, but rather have information brought directly to them. What can we do to bring a bit of order to that chaos, to that structure? What can we do in terms of really increasing productivity from the start of your day forward? And that's where, for those of you who haven't seen it, we've introduced our Atlassian Home product. Initially on the cloud side, we'll talk later on how some elements may shift from on-premise to cloud over time. But Atlassian Home is meant to be that single place for you to stay on top of your workday, to give you that unified view across a number of different systems so that rather than hopping through multiple applications and tabs, you've simply got one go-to area, especially if you think about how you start your day today. All right, and I'll share with you a bit on what I do. So I log in. If I'm working remote, I VPN in. I fire up my browser. I automatically have 4 tabs that open. First one is internal systems. Second one is my email. The third and fourth ones are 2 different JIRA service desk queues that I have to manage. And then I fire up a chat window off to the side off of that and try to sort out what are the right priorities for the day that I need to tackle. And I think many of us go through some variation of that. I don't know about you, but quick show of hands, how many of you have had a day in the last, say, month or 2 where you've done a lot, you've churned through all that information, but 5 o'clock rolls around and you think you didn't actually achieve anything? You were busy, but were you productive? Don't be shy. You can raise your hands, right? I mean, even working at a company that focuses on teamwork, right? I still have this happen, and maybe that's partly my own fault. But we have those days, and so Atlassian Home is meant to help streamline that by taking all these different signals that we get from a lot of different areas and trying to reduce the noise to signal ratio. What's important that you need to know now? What are some actions that you need to take off of that versus simply pan across everything and try to sort it out on your own? And this is exactly what Home is meant to do, especially across our own product lines. So if you're using JIRA and Confluence and Bitbucket and Bamboo and a number of other systems, rather than going to each of those and finding your notifications and actions, Home gives you one view to see those in a consistent way. And it surfaces with some intelligence to you the items that it thinks you need to take action on first. So it gives you one view, and then across that, not only giving you different alerts that beforehand you would have seen in different application windows, but also allowing you to take action directly in line. So if there's a task you've been assigned, if there's a comment on a page you created that you need to respond to, rather than linking off, opening yet another tab in your browser, you can simply do it right from within Atlassian Home. So it becomes kind of your main dashboard to help you get through your priorities so that best as you can focus on the deeper work activities first and help ensure that you're getting things done in an appropriate fashion throughout your day. It does this across all the different products that I've mentioned, especially on the Atlassian side. It's also an area that we'll be providing APIs and third-party add-ons for. So if you want to tie in other systems, you can extend that view. And it gives you not only this newsfeed type of an approach, but it allows you to also search across all of that from one tab. So again, trying to give you a bit more productivity boost, at least first thing in the day. I'm waiting for when we can finally use this across all of our different installations internally, because not surprisingly, we have heaps of different JIRA and Confluence installs. And we're just spinning this up now on the cloud side. More to come on the premise aspect as well. And that's just one source of information that we get when we're working daily. Another one that we deal with quite consistently, one I've mentioned, email, right? And that's its own challenge in terms of how do we really reduce email. Quite often that leads to a discussion around chat tools. So whether you're using, before it was HipChat or Slack or a number of other messaging types of capabilities, the intent there was to pull stuff out of your inbox and allow you to react to it, but hopefully have more focused conversations. I think, though, we've all probably seen how that's now become its own distraction, right? Internally, chat is probably one of the last applications that I'll fire up because you can easily get twisted in a number of directions. That, however, has changed, and it's a large part of the driver around which we decided to create Stride. So for anyone who's had a look at this, you may have seen some of the differences already. Stride benefits from our 15 years of building and working with a number of different collaboration tools. It's more than just another messaging product. I was the first one that when I initially saw it come out, I thought, great, you know, we've got all these competitors, we've got HipChat, now we've got Stride. Like, what does Stride do that's different? Why do I care? We'll touch on that. It's definitely a unique combination of the core things that a messaging platform needs to have, along with some additional elements that allows you to make it more productive. So again, reducing that signal to noise ratio as part of that. So what are the things that Stride offers? Well, firstly, it has the typical messaging capabilities as part of it. It also has an integrated cross-platform real-time meeting experience, which is just a long-winded way of saying video. You can have a video chat with people on your team as well. It also has the ability to track discussions and tag key points in a conversation as being a decision point or an action item. And I'll elaborate on this in a little bit, but this is where things differentiate a bit for Stride. So rather than having to wade through heaps of conversation if you were in an offsite all day to figure out what happened and what do you need to do, people on the team can actually just tag and say, almost like Post-it notes, read this, sign here, take action on this item. And you can get a bit of a synopsis on where you need to focus on versus reading 120 messages because you were away from your desk for a few hours. So having the ability to tag those decisions and refer to them at any point is key. And then when you go to act on some of those items, being able to shut all that down, right? Chat is great, you want the tool up and running, but sometimes you need to go heads down in a task. Focus mode is fantastic, and it's kind of like a polite do not disturb. I'm working on something, I want to hear from you, just know that I'm not going to pay attention right now. I use this quite a bit in a slightly different way. So I'm part of a global team that has some of my peers are in the US, some are in Europe, and quite often on Friday night, Sydney time, when I get home, when the US is coming online, or when Europe is partway through their day, and I'm ready to go into weekend mode, they're all pinging messages on Stride and my alerts going off on my mobile. So I'll literally put it in focus mode and just say weekend. Like, I'll get back to you on my Monday. I'm glad it's your Friday morning, but we'll chat later. So there are a lot of different ways in which you can use focus mode to, again, just stay in touch with things as you need to, but also have the ability to tune that out. And then finally, not unlike with Atlassian Home, Stride will have APIs and add-ons. There are already several available out there so that you can pull in notifications from a number of different systems and use that directly in line as well. Who in here happens to have already been looking at or is using Stride, just out of curiosity? Okay, a couple. Good. So one of your action items out of today is at least take a look at it. And I've got a link with some information on that as well. I think a good way to go through this, though, in terms of a typical scenario, is to look at incident management, support case that's come in, and how can we facilitate resolution versus having email and a separate phone call and different conversations on a JIRA ticket. Those are also involved. But one of the things that we do internally is we'll actually create these swarm rooms. So a request comes in, and in this example, customers having trouble with a shopping cart. The support engineers looked at it and said, I think I know what's going on. One of the developers made a change in the last half hour. We need to escalate this up quickly and get things resolved. Well, rather than just going back and forth on the ticket, right from inside of that, the support engineer can say, you know what, I need to pull in a number of people. And these people, quite often, and Atlassian's no different. In fact, I was talking to someone before today's seminar began and said, we have even our own engineering staff are all over the place. Some products are in Sydney, some will soon be in India, some are in Poland, some are in California. It really runs the gamut in terms of the different types of people, the different geographies they're in, the different time zones they're in. But for incident management, you usually need to pull them all together. You can't be bothered to predetermine a lot of that or spend a lot of time sorting that out. You just need to be able to link people in as you require them. So what our support engineers will quite often do, and I've been in several of these as well, at least been copied in on them, is severity, level 1 issue occurs. Support engineer says, right, we're going to create a chat room and let's use Stride. I don't know everybody I need right away, but I'll keep the same JIRA ticket key. And you know what? I know I need Don, one of our administrators, to clue in on this. And all he has to do to link him in is just mention him by name. Mention him, he's automatically added to the room. And we can start to have a conversation directly from there. And we can see already that Don is aware that, yes, we rolled out a change. He knows who the developer is. So again, rather than the support engineer doing tons of research to figure out who is that individual to talk to, they simply start linking in additional people and have the conversation right from there. Now, a lot of this can happen in text format, and quite often it will. But there's always a point at which, and it seems like I'm always one of the ones that has to raise my hand for this, when just texting back and forth is almost counterproductive. It's like, you know what, guys? Let's save all the messaging and let's just hop on a video chat for like 5 minutes. I bet we would save an hour worth of back and forth in text if we do that. Well, from within Stride, when you're ready to have that chat, you can take advantage of those real-time collaborative services, that video chat feature that I mentioned as well. So I can take everyone who's already linked into the room and I can say, right, you know what? Let's have a chat now. Doesn't matter where you are, if you're at your desk, if you're on your mobile, let's go ahead and let's spin up a quick conversation. Video and or audio, up to you, but I want to get everyone involved and start this meeting so that regardless of where they're working and what device they're on, Stride will propagate across that and link everyone in directly. So we can fire that up, have a quick chat, figure out what needs to occur, and as part of this, some decisions will ultimately be made. Right? Yes, we've identified it, or we know the bug fix to go to, or we know the exact developer, or whatever that resolution is. As you're coming up with those decision points, that's where the feature that I mentioned around action items comes into play, right? Because maybe some people need to refer back to this later on. Maybe there are a couple of individuals who aren't available to chat straight away, but still need to know, not the entire conversation, but just the highlights. So what we can do within Stride as we're having this conversation is I can tag an item as a decision point. I can say right here, we need to update information. We need to make change to a piece of code. And I can also say, I know who the developer is that needs to do it. They were part of this conversation. So let's allocate a task, in this example, to Amy to make sure that she can resolve issues that we identified as part of our conversation. If I need to ever refer back to this after the fact, or if I'm not in the original conversation, the fact that these are tagged as part of a larger conversation allows me to simply pull up the highlights later on. This I find really useful because, again, I can't be in every conversation. I might be, like I am this week, I'm on the road quite a bit, I'm traveling. I can't be bothered to read through hundreds of messages. Just give me the synopsis. What are the things that I need to be aware of? What are the highlights? What were the decisions? What are any tasks that have been assigned to me? And that's great for me, as well as any people that might join the team over time as well. It's a nice, easy way to refer back to some of those critical decision points that tend to occur. Now, getting a lot of this activity done through chat is useful, but I've mentioned a couple of times already this idea of signal-to-noise ratio. Right? We've got a lot of data coming at us. We've just had a mini incident response scenario through Stride. And we've also identified that Amy needs to get some work done. So I talked about focus mode for when I go into the weekend. Amy's been dubbed with making this change now. Let's let her now focus on her job. And when she says, right, I'm going to get into fixing this bug, she can use focus mode. She's still there, she's still in Stride, but she's not going to get pop-up alerts. Don't expect a quick response from her straight away. This is a nice, kind of a polite do not disturb that will then show for anybody who tries to reach out to her until her activity is done. And I think this is a great way to, again, participate where you need to, not necessarily shut things down, but just kind of put them on hold over time as well. And then when she's finished, she can simply come back in, update the task, switch off her focus mode, and go from there. So I think even just with this short scenario, you can already see that there are a few differentiators from just team messaging to streamlining team workflow. And we're going to continue to build that out. This is just with what we've started with today. And again, I know only a couple of hands went up earlier for people who had even looked at it. But definitely sign up for Stride. And take a look at it and see if it fits, even if just for a couple of projects. I think it's definitely worth taking a look at. Now, I mentioned with Stride one of the components that we went through was this video, this real-time collaboration example. We found several other areas in which you might want to use just that service. One of them, and again, some of you might have picked up on this as well, how many Trello users in the audience? That's always the case. I come to these things. People may not use JIRA, they may not use Stride, they may not even necessarily know Atlassian, but Trello is definitely out there. I use it a lot personally as well, even before Atlassian acquired them. But what we did specific to Trello was took that same video service, that same collaborative capability, and we modeled it into Trello. So in the upper right here, you see there's a board menu link. Same idea for Trello, just as in the Swarm example that I went through. If rather than moving around cards and adding attachments and defining how you want your board to be updated, you need to have a conversation, I can simply fire up a board meeting and have all the participants in line for a video chat as well. And it uses that same video service exactly as we saw a moment ago. Also done across device so that regardless of where people are, we can get their input and go from there. And certainly also then within Trello, capture any resulting action items as you tend to do within Trello, probably through card updates. But Trello is definitely another area that we're continuing to invest and extend in. And again, if you haven't taken a look, although we had a lot more hands go up in the room, we'll have some more information here shortly on some special offers around that, some time-boxed offers that you can have a look at as well. We use Trello a lot internally, and a couple of examples are actually building out this slide deck that was used here at a number of our marketing events. When corporate marketing was actually putting this in place, they were literally saying, here are the segments that we want, here are the topics that we want to cover, here are the individual tasks, here's the order that we want them in, and use Trello for mapping out much of that information as well. Whether it's for events like this, whether it's for new hire onboarding, actually something that I picked up for our team. We used to do things primarily through Confluence pages, and we would just clone a new page where somebody would start and tweak some of the tasks and say, here's your 90-day onboarding plan. That's all moved now to Trello Boards. So we'll clone the board, you have all this information. As you complete each task, you just move it across columns, and you go from there. And it seems to have definitely streamlined that action much more. So we use it internally. Again, I've used it for some of my own activities as well. And it allows you to not only track a number of tasks that you define on your own, but certainly integrate across the full Atlassian suite of products. So you've got power-ups for JIRA, for Confluence, and so on, as well as a number of integrations with things like GitHub and Slack and Dropbox and Zapier and so on. So there are a number of different ways to tie in, again, that constellation of data silos that you're dealing with today and putting that in one place, whether it's with Home, whether it's with Stride, or whether it's with Trello. And that's an area that we'll continue to add more power-ups and integrations to as well. If you haven't already taken a look at Trello and you just want to try it, if you go to Trello.com/teamtour, and you can sign up from there to get 3 months of time-boxed evaluation on some additional power-ups. So if you want to have a quick look at not just the baseline Trello offering, but some additional add-ons that you might want to look at as well, definitely take a look at that URL. Now, I've mentioned a couple of common examples on Trello boards. Some of our teams got a bit creative in terms of using boards also. So doing a retrospective for a project team, it's a common one. And that retrospective can be done either for the engineering teams or for both for the server as well as the cloud. And specific to the cloud team, there were a lot of requests and changes that were made around the user interface. And as a result of some of the input that they captured, some of the recommendations on how to improve that, and again, these were a few conversations that I was having before the event started. One of the things that our cloud team in particular has focused on quite extensively is improving the user experience, which over time, portions of which will find its way to the server line as well. But we innovate first on cloud for things like this, and we push to server, and vice versa. I'll talk a bit more to that soon. But just to give you a sense for anyone who's not used cloud or not used it recently, just to give you a sense of what some of those changes are, we've got a short clip to look through here. There's a test on this list later. And so our cloud team has been quite busy in retooling that UX. And again, portions of that over time may not take exactly the same shape, but innovations that we take on the cloud deployment offering over time may come across the server, and vice versa. As we make changes that are prioritized on server, some of those tend to make their way to cloud as well. But again, kudos to the JIRA software team. They've been quite busy. JIRA is definitely, even outside the UX, a pretty powerful system, which is to say you can configure it a number of ways. We saw some new examples of that in the video. But even with the UX changes, one thing that's quite consistent across a number of installs is that in order to customize it, ultimately all roads lead to the JIRA administrator, right? You've got people who want changes for a number of installs saying, I need a new workflow, I need a new issue type, I need a new custom field, I want to reorder things. And it's always coming to the JIRA admin. Now, the JIRA admin is usually one individual, maybe a couple if you're lucky, depending on the size of your company, but it's somebody who easily becomes quite overloaded with these actions. And they can basically do one of two things with previous versions of the software. They can either just try to keep pace and prioritize with the changes that are coming in, or, and I've seen this happen at some big accounts, they can say, you know what, I'll just make you a JIRA admin and you do it yourself. Like, just please don't break anything, but go in and make the changes that you want. And of course, we all know how that ultimately accumulates over time. Somebody goes in and breaks something. I'm fairly trained up on JIRA administration, and I've managed to break things. So you really shouldn't have to choose between having all the power and having no power. You know, there should be levels in between. And in terms of being able to delegate more of that, to really empower the team, we've added in some new roles and permissions, extended permissions and capabilities so that you don't have to overly compromise, that you can be smart in terms of how you activate some of these features. With a project administrator, what you can now do is that rather than going back to a JIRA admin, if I just want to add a new field, you know, it's a field just for my project, just for my issue type, I just need to add one new category field. I don't want it to affect everyone else. Rather than having them go back and do that on their own, if the JIRA admin has said, yes, I will give you extra capability to go in and manage this, they can now go in, look at the details for their project, take a look at all the issue types, and then say, off of this for bugs, I want to define a new category. And it's going to be very constrained and very easy. It's not going to be code level activities. It's not going to take hacking up XML in order to get these to occur. But rather, I'll select from a field, what type of data do I want, what are the sample values, and I can add it directly in line for an issue type. So delegating that off, allowing project administrators for their project to make basic changes is something that is now available, as well as making modifications to simple workflow. So not long, overly elaborate workflows or workflows that are shared across different projects, but a basic workflow, adding a new step, can be done indirectly through a board, can be done directly as part of this setup as well. And that's something that a JIRA admin can selectively give to project owners, to project administrators as well. And you'll see more of that. Again, some more of that has already been built out on the cloud side, and it trickles down to the server side where it makes sense as well. In terms of organizing access to information, especially on the cloud side, we did see in the video some new board types that were walked through in the demonstration flow. Again, I'd mentioned how we can add, using a simple workflow, even just as a board member, I can add a new stage to a workflow. I can reorder the sequence. If it's just a basic, add a new column, insert items in line, even an individual team member can do that as well. And they don't have to worry about how it's wired on the back end. I just go to the board, add a new column, done. Easy, as it should be. If you don't want that to be the case, you can certainly turn that off. But again, more often than not, requesting these types of changes is something that's done. As well as, go figure, then being able to add issues in line, right? Rather than going from the board view and popping up to a detail view or going up under issues create or again having multiple tabs, just doing it right in place. You've got the new column, add an issue, done. Easy. Seems easy now, seems intuitive now. It wasn't so easy necessarily to get it there from an engineering perspective. Especially when you think of all the changes that are required to the UX, this smattering of information, a huge amount, again, of signal-to-noise ratio on the issue detail screen. Our UX team took a look at all of that, recategorized it, and came up with this streamlined view of things. And this is a view that ideally over time will open up to allow you to extend more. So I don't know where he's at, who I was talking to earlier, but this was the exact conversation we were having. How can we customize the screens a bit more without hacking the code? How can we add in extension points to have data from other systems as well? This will continue to evolve to allow you to do more of that. It's not where we need it to be so that you can do that today, but it's at least good for you to know kind of the path that it's on. And again, this took a significant amount of analysis to redo it well. One of the knocks that I've always heard about, especially JIRA software, the polite way to put it was, you can tell it's designed by engineers. Yeah, especially when you look at the user experience, not exactly the most user-friendly type of experience out of the gate. This starts to change that in a very big way. And again, more of this will move from the cloud side, innovate on the cloud, especially for UX. More of this over time will start to appear in server as well. Another thing we improved also is search. So searching across projects and boards and issues and filters and a number of different areas. Having that all integrated in one place. So again, I don't have to hop through multiple tabs and instances and chase a variety of different app links, but rather just view it all in one place, have a federated search capability, and just be done with it. I want to know where, in this example, anything related to iOS is. That's also part of some of the more behind-the-scenes updates, not necessarily a screen change itself, but still important in terms of getting more work done throughout the day. So that's JIRA, especially mostly JIRA Cloud. We're pretty excited by a lot of the investment we've done in the UX and where it's come so far. There will be more along those lines. Again, a lot of what I've shown is more on the cloud side, but it'll propagate across. Already on the server side are some of the things that we started with there on project administrators, on extended permissions, on some of the additional delegated capabilities, so that whether you're using cloud or server, you can more effectively empower your team already today. And just pivoting slightly from cloud to the other side, and I don't know, I'd be curious to find out at some point what the mix is in the audience as well. On-premise solutions, whether server or data center, we manage those at a different velocity intentionally from cloud. So I talked about UX improvements already on one side. Usually when you're looking at server or especially data center for high-end installations, we're talking more HA, failover, enterprise level scaling requirements, more so than front-end user experience or nice to have cloud integrations. We manage that internally as two separate teams. So there is some common code base elements between, for example, JIRA Cloud and JIRA Server. But they are managed as two different code bases, two different teams, two different velocities, release cycles. And again, over time, where it makes sense, we link across them as well. And I call that out because some of the investments we make and some of the things that I'll walk through here on the server side, again, it speaks to that difference in focus, that difference in priority as well. And if you think of it from your perspective, and these are the things that we hear from our customers and our partners, and we need to continue structuring our approach this way because you want different things depending on what kind of installations you're using. If it's simply server on-prem, one of the key things might be just, I want easier upgrades. I have JIRA. I don't necessarily want to worry about taking the system offline. What does that look like? If I have data center with 30,000 users on Confluence, how can I archive older things? We've got a lot of information. We need to pair some of that off. How are you guys helping me to be able to do that? If it's the cloud side, it's integration with more cloud services, with more SaaS elements, right? How can we pull in things like PagerDuty and Salesforce and so on to unify that view on that front as well? We will continue, we have been, and we will continue to prioritize differently across the different deployment options. So whether it's behind the firewall, an on-premise installation with server and or data center, we can speak to that. If it's the Atlassian cloud offerings, we've already walked through a couple of examples on where we're taking that as well. Specifically, though, to more the behind the firewall, to the on-premise solutions, and especially when you're looking at data center, we're trying to prioritize our own internal backlog with a lot of information that we're getting from you, right? What are the at-scale requirements? How do we make sure it performs at scale? How do we make sure that the necessary features are there that you need when you're looking at moving from 100 or 1,000 users to 10,000 or 40,000 users? It really introduces some interesting complexities. And we do track all of this. How many people have ever upvoted or entered a Jack ticket? JIRA.Atlassian.com. Yeah, there should be more hands going up than that. So if you have requests, if you'd like to see features from us that are prioritized differently, if you want to see what things are in the queue, again, open company, right? You can see our backlog, or one of the main inputs for our backlog to our engineering teams in the form of JIRA.Atlassian.com. And like any good software company, we come up with acronyms all over the place. So we just call it JACK, JIRA.Atlassian.com. These are just some of the features that we've delivered over the last year, some of the Jack tickets. And we assess them on a number of elements, but one of the main indicators are the number of votes that you guys all put in on it, right? And in terms of different issues that we've resolved during that period, it's reflective of issues that had more than 17,000 votes on them. So we do listen to you and definitely provide your input. You have a direct line in terms of helping us to prioritize additional features or fixes that you would like to see on these products as well. So specifically to JIRA, and in particular 7.6, we finally addressed an issue that had been out there for a couple of years that had, I think, one of the most voted suggestions on JIRA.Atlassian.com, and that was being able to have priorities per project. So rather than having one priority scheme that was across all the different installations, all the different projects you'd have on one installation, we allow you to go in on a per project basis and say, this is the scheme, this is a designation I want to use for project A and B and C. It was a request that had been out there for a few years, and it had, again, over 2,500 votes as part of that. So now if you want, you can use the standard, kind of the default naming scheme for categorizing different issue types from blocker to minor. If you're more of a IT support organization, you can give it sub-levels. If you really want to get cheeky, you can kind of have it be reflective of exactly how you feel But it's up to you, right? You can set these indicators, and you can do it project by project. This was something that people had been asking us for quite a while, and it's finally now in the server product as well. And another interesting thing that has already kind of come from the cloud space directly into server are the mobile apps. So for anyone who may have seen the Confluence mobile app that previously was just for cloud, you can now use that with Confluence Server. So you can take that same application, use it like any other mobile app, and have direct access to all the different updates. You can see notifications. You can make edits appropriate to a mobile device. You don't want to have the full set of WYSIWYG controls, but at least enough that if you need to make a quick change, you can do that directly from your phone. It'll tie into your standard Confluence URL and allow you to maintain those connection settings, even help you locate it if you need a little bit of additional information in terms of wiring that in and then having a full view right off of your mobile to any Confluence updates. This is great for me because, again, sometimes, even though we try not to work on the weekends, every once in a while, or maybe when I'm going to catch my next flight, I can't necessarily fire up my laptop or find a Wi-Fi, but at least if somebody's commented on a page of mine, I can go ahead and make a quick update right from my phone. That started with cloud. That's now available for server, and stay tuned for the counterpart on JIRA as well. So there will be a JIRA mobile app with similar device-specific functionality coming up as well. In terms of additional features, and this is specific to not only so much JIRA, but JIRA Service Desk, one of the top requests that we got was having canned responses. So rather than taking in a piece of information and having a support engineer having to craft a response over and over and over again, simply having that as a template within JSD or JIRA Service Desk as well is now something that's available. I'm actually part of 2 different JSD queues internally, and this is great because we do get enough repetitive tasks that, if, for example, a request comes in on how do I set up my VPN and what are the special elements around that, I can simply go in, search through, or even pick the most commonly used responses that are available and push that out straight away. Still go in and modify it if I need to make some tweaks for this individual, but most likely just use it as is, pop it out, done. Ultimately, over time, some of these templates could also become knowledge-based items, so that up front you would even just have ticket deflection, right? People ideally shouldn't even be opening a ticket. As they go to search for something, it'll just push that forward to them as well, so being able to shift left a little bit more on that information also. But canned responses in JIRA Service Desk is something that, again, had received a lot of votes that we've now put into the product. I mentioned a couple of times this cross-pollination of activities. It's interesting how sometimes there's a feature that's already resident in both, that when you use it on one side versus the other at a larger scale, it just doesn't quite work the way that you thought. So smart mentions are a good example, right? If I'm in Confluence on the cloud and I'm editing a page and I want to reference one of my coworkers, well, that's great, but actually it says Denise here, but I'll pick on my own name, Scott, right? There's one obvious Scott who people might pick by accident. There's also about 15 other Scotts in the company right now. That's only with 3,000 employees for Atlassian. What happens when we're 5? What happens when we're 10? What happens when you're a company of 40,000 users? There's going to be a lot of people sharing the same first name. And besides the obvious, like I just have to scroll through a lot of options, and God forbid if there's 2 people with the same first name and surname, then like what do you do? Performance is an issue as well. So you don't see this necessarily on Confluence so much because it's typically smaller teams. But on the enterprise side, it definitely pops up quite a bit. So we've retooled Smart Mentions so that it's a bit more aware of who are the members of the team on this page, who contributed, who previously commented, what are the ones that I already have in cache. And it uses all of that to help accelerate and make some smart recommendations to reduce the time that is required for you to actually tag up some of these pages. So Smart Mentions is a big aspect as part of that. And these are just a few examples for some of the most highly voted issues or jack tickets that were out there as well. But they're all reflective, especially on the server side, of things that you've told us you want to see at scale. And when you're really looking at information on scale, that's where we start to talk about not so much just our server offerings, but data center. So when you want to take one JIRA install and really have it span out across multiple machines. Still be one logical install, but give you some additional availability. We have data center as an option for JIRA and Confluence, Bitbucket, JSD, HipChat, as well as Crowd. And we did a lot already in JIRA to help you manage not only unplanned downtime, so again, rather than having JIRA on one box and that box goes offline for whatever reason and then nobody can work, being able to spread that out across multiple servers so that front-end users don't have to worry about hardware level issues or OS patching level issues. Planned downtime is another thing that Data Center helps you manage as well. And with JIRA in particular, we've already implemented something called ZDU, or Zero Downtime Upgrade. So I can actually do an in-place, node-by-node rolling upgrade while the system is up and running and still allow front-end users to access the system. So you no longer have to plan your maintenance upgrades for the weekend. You can actually do it while production is up and running. I mention that because that makes sense for JIRA, because the nature of JIRA is pretty transactional. There's about as many reads as writes into the system. But for something like Confluence, that equation is shifted a bit, right? About 80% of people only read information, point in time, versus having to edit or update. So for data centers specifically, to manage at scale, not only unplanned but planned downtime, there's now a read-only mode available in Confluence. And you can think of it like the ZDU equivalent that is appropriate for a Confluence environment. When the administrator throws it into read-only mode, you'll get a banner across the top. And users, just as the name implies, they can go in, they can look up information, they can search for information, but they can't edit, they can't comment. It'll just kind of freeze them out because things are changing under the hood. So it gives you an example of some elements for cloud, some elements for server, some elements for data server, and hopefully it gives you enough of a sense of how we definitely collect information from all of you, and we take it quite seriously, the number of votes, the issues that you put in from both customers and partners. We use, where appropriate, we kind of innovate a bit more on the cloud and propagate those across. We still also have features that make sense to do on the server first, but along the way, we're always looking at scaling higher with whatever deployment option you use. And this really rounds out the product section of the three main pillars for enabling great teamwork, right? Right people, right products, right practices. Now, I've only got a few minutes left. I've been given the warning sign back here a couple of times. Hopefully, I can rapid fire through my last few slides, just to keep us on time mark already. And I did want to at least preview, when I come back this afternoon, some of what we'll delve into a bit more on the practices side. So again, people we won't talk about today, products we went through a bit, but practices. In terms of when you look at how your teams are using all their different tools, again, it can be a bit disjointed, right? There's a number of different solutions, number of different team types, and we may just even have different fundamental ways of operating. And when we reflected on this internally, we actually asked our different teams, like, do you have a shared understanding of what your team should be doing? I was just at a team offsite of my own in Texas a couple of weeks ago, and we went through this. What's your impression of what our team does? What is our charter? Are we meeting that charter? Do we all agree on what it is? And is it the right thing? Do we need to change it? Do we have the right people on the team? Do we have the people with the necessary skills? Yes or no, and what's your impression on that? Do we know when we've succeeded? And this is a big, big thing. This is usually the way it's literally phrased inside Atlassian, right? We come up with all these great ideas. We have somebody that's going to manage it. We know the approach we're going to take. And then invariably, somebody says, how will we know if we succeed? What are the values? What are the metrics? What are the signs that we know we've actually done this well? Well, we've taken that experience from our 200 different teams internally, as well as what we've experienced through some of the biggest customers that we have. And we've packaged this up to help give all of you a sense of what you should be looking at, how you can kind of take a temperature read on where your team is at today, and what are the ideas on how to move that forward, and also giving you the ability to track that over time. So we look at different health monitors, as we call them. And they're very simple, just like 8 to 10 categories, green, yellow, red. Everyone on the team gets a vote. And just like you assess at a company level or an individual level, it's important to look at a team level, right? Is this team working effectively? And not just what the manager thinks, because there's a vested interest there, right? What does the team think? Everyone gets a vote. Everyone gets a say. And because, especially within our own company, we're fairly open about what our impressions are, it's an easy chat to have. Now, I concede that's not always the same place at every company. I know that might vary based on company and culture. But I think it's good to at least think about it in those terms, right? Where are we at? Track it over time. What are some ideas on changing that? That can be done as it is here. This is literally a snapshot from our Sydney office. You'll see these boards everywhere as you walk around our office. People tracking different projects and different team health checks. And it's for everyone to view. It's out in plain view of everyone. Whether it's a board in the office, whether it's a Confluence page that you track over time, whether it's a Trello board. Like, pick the tool that works best for you, doesn't matter. We used Post-it notes, and we were putting it up right on the window where we were at. Whatever works best for you. But the key thing is to start tracking it, start measuring it and tracking it over time. Even better is that based on these experiences we've had internally, don't hit the mic, Scott, and other customers that we've been at, we're able to package all of this up and share these deliverables with you in something called the team playbook. So if you look at nothing else today, classic speaker cue on please do this, look at the Atlassian team playbook. In terms of practices, there's a lot of IP. There's a lot of experience. There's a lot of lessons learned that we've distilled and put in these team playbooks for you. And that's whether it's an engineering team, a management team, an HR team, a legal team. We have different formats of this. But definitely take a look at this so that as you're using more of our products, you're not just spinning them up and integrating them, but you know the best way to harness everything they can do. So take a look a bit more at team playbooks. I'll be back in the afternoon to chat on this, and I've got 30 seconds left to go, and I can say thank you very much for your time today.